Hello and welcome to the CFB SuperShow, brought to you by the FTN Network. I'm Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85, and joined as always by my man Jake Kucheck. We are riding into week 5. It's crazy how fast the season is going. We're going to be into Halloween and college basketball. I'm pulling double duty before you know it. Big show planned tonight. We have 13 games. Once again, it seems like that is going to be the DraftKings norm going forward. Going to do our tried and true game-by-game breakdown that we do. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, make sure you drop those in the chat. We'll see them if they're on YouTube or on Twitter. Either way, we'll also be giving you cores, slate breakers, touchdown calls, along with PrizePicks, Underdog, and betting opportunities. But before we do so, we like to do a quick recap of last week, talk a little bit about what worked, what didn't. Main slate was another mixed bag for me personally. Taylor Green did not do what I was hoping. Devin Neal had an okay game, but there was a lot of chalky running backs who nuked. It was actually the night slate that I did quite well on. Caleb Johnson, once again, sub 20%. I don't think we're going to get him very low owned anymore whenever Iowa's on the slate. Love how he played. Overall, it was a pretty good day just because of that slate, but the main definitely some work to be done there to get back on the right track. Jake, how did you feel about last week? And, what are you looking forward to heading into this one? I think Jake is frozen. Okay. What's up? I got my man Dom plays here. I don't think what's up, Jeremy? Wife and I just had our first baby, so late night with the baby means time for the late night super show, man. Well, I love it, man. I'm glad that you're on here. Congratulations, Jeremy, on the new child. Now, real quick, for those of you who are there, yeah, it seems like Jake was frozen. He just dropped off there. I think I am being able to be heard. So hopefully that whole spiel I just did at the beginning didn't go to nobody screaming into the void. That sometimes happens to me, the void and myself hanging out. But yeah, I'm really glad to see you, Jeremy. It's been a while. I don't think I've seen you. The new baby, I'm sure, is keeping you quite busy, but that's an exciting time for sure. And then Don plays, my dude. Like the name there. I can't say it. But I got some bets for tomorrow. I got some bets for Saturday. I'm feeling pretty darn good. And I think Jake had a couple that he put on a show he recently did this week that we're in alignment with. So we'll be giving you guys those plays throughout and at the end for sure during the betting segment. All right, let's see if we got Jake here. I was talking and you were frozen. Looks like you are there now though. You're working.
Yeah. So. I'm doing it. I don't know what happened. We had a little technical difficulty. I'm on the phone for now, so hopefully I can get back on the laptop.
No worries. All right. Well, we're gonna skip the we kind of did our thing already, but we're not gonna do any more recap. Let's just get right into it here. Game by game, the 13 gamers. Let's start. We're gonna start with BYU versus Baylor. We have a total of 47, and right now Baylor as a 3-point favorite. Kind of talked a little bit there about a bet that I'm really high on. It was in my free betting article earlier, and then you recently did a guest spot on VSiN. Congrats, that's awesome. And I heard one of the bets that you liked was BYU, and that is one of my picks, BYU money line. Seems kind of odd. I know it's a road game, but they are clearly the better team, I think. So this is a spot I love for betting purposes. Break this one down for us.
Yeah, love everything that is going on with this BYU team. It's just, college football is all about stories and the pageantry and the history, and sometimes you just feel like a team is a special team, and that's kind of what we got going on with this BYU team. So coming off a win that I think, maybe some people were expecting, them to squeak out a nail biter. I don't think anyone was really expecting them to curb stomp Kansas State the way that they did, and in the fashion that they did, and backup linebackers playing running back and running all over the defense, and second string wide receivers who are like 5'5" and 160 pounds running 90-yard punt returns. Like that kind of stuff just makes you think that, okay, this is a team of destiny that has, has something special going. And so, yes, very much like the BYU side, Sione Moa at running back, if we get another week of like BYU just basically not having a running back, he's in the 3K range, and that's that's silly if he's going to see another 18 to 20 touches at that price. That's like a pretty much a must play. Obviously, BYU may be getting Hinkley Rapati back this week, and he's okay too he's at 4.3. That's still a reasonable price to pay, and Retzlaff, I love him as an actual real life football quarterback. For DFS purposes, I'm a little bit less high on him than the pairing options or the receiving options that you would use him with, just because there are a lot of other quarterbacks I would certainly like to get to on this slate. But definitely in play with whoever the starting running back is going to be. And then on the Baylor side, we have not seen a lot of DeQuan Finn healthy yet. I would love to see DeQuan Finn be healthy. I don't know that we're going to get there in this one, but I think there's definitely some talent locked up in there that I would like to see get on the field and make some plays. Sawyer Robinson showed some athleticism that I didn't know that he had against Colorado. Running for 9 carries, 82 yards and a touchdown, and throwing not super efficiently, but also getting a couple scores that way. But using him against what I think is going to be a pretty tough BYU defense. Is at home, like that a little bit, but not necessarily a place that I want to get to with Sawyer Robertson, although pretty well priced. So. That'll be interesting. It would also be interesting if we could get some clarity on the running back situation. Bryson Washington was extremely cheap and in kind of a smash spot against Colorado. A lot of people, including myself, flocked to the ownership on Bryson Washington with good reason, and he completely failed to perform. We got 15 Dom Richardson carries, who also didn't do a whole lot with his carries. And in general, this Baylor offense didn't do a lot. It's weird to say the offense didn't do a lot when they scored 31 points, but we didn't get a lot of impressive individual fantasy performances other than from Sawyer Robertson himself. So not a lot of pieces that I just feel the need to completely fit in from a DFS perspective on this one, but very much like the BYU side from a betting perspective. And also if we get some clarity on who is going to be the running back that gets the majority of the carries for BYU, I like that person, whoever that person is. Absent the clarity, I like it a little bit less, but still something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, for sure. Looking at this one, I kind of, I like Retzlaff as well, as you mentioned, but it's kind of hard to get there from a main team perspective just because, there's efficiency there, which you like, but sometimes BYU's so efficient that they end up, him throwing for 150 yards, 2 touchdowns, and that just doesn't get it done at nearly 8K. He's shown some rushing ability as well, but it's a little bit tougher to get there. Only ad I want to have is Chase Roberts, who's a little bit priced up there at 5'9". He's been kind of the go-to guy for Retzlaff, so I do like him, but I think it might be hard to find some.
Would just like to see him get some more volume. He'll get 3 to 4 carries or 3 to 4 receptions, and maybe he gets a touchdown, maybe he doesn't. You're not going to necessarily see like a 12 150 and 2 game out of Chase Roberts, I don't think.
No, and they're spreading the targets out, which is killing it. So if he was swapped with Lassiter and priced at 3.7, I think you and I'd probably be way higher on him at that point.
Very much so.
We'll see how it goes. All right, next game is Kentucky versus Ole Miss. We have a total of 52.5. The Rebels 15.5 point favorites. On the Kentucky side, Chip Trainum has been medically cleared earlier this week, but he will miss this game. Super Show favorite from last year. Just want to add there, Jamarian Wilcox, who is the backup at the moment, has been pushing for snaps, and he's been way more efficient. They are talking about getting him more looks, but with Chip kind of, in the wings there about to come back, it's just going to clog that running back room up more. Wilcox, not really a DFS play, but it wouldn't surprise me if he starts getting more looks. Unfortunately, the passing game's been pretty horrific, so it doesn't really matter who's going to be running the football until they start figuring things out. It's been completely stuck in neutral. Brock Vandegrift has not looked at all like the top 5 quarterback recruit he was in the 2021 class. Heading into the season, I was kind of excited to see him step into this role, but it's not working out for Kentucky, and I don't think that they're going to be able to keep up offensively. As good as the defense has been for Kentucky, I do think this Ole Miss offense will just wear them out. I think you're going to end up seeing them clear that 15.5 pretty easily. Jackson Dart, one of the Heisman candidates here, top 3 Heisman candidate at this point, leads the FBS with 1,554 passing yards. That's a lot in just under a quarter of the season. He has thrown for 377 plus passing yards in all 4 games so far, and those 4 games have all been blowouts. We're talking 51-3, 48-0. So he's doing this in games that aren't close. Now that they get into the SEC schedule, I mean, we're liable to see him put up some games where he's throwing maybe for 500 yards in certain circumstances. Probably not here against Kentucky, but there's going to be times where at 10K, we still have to consider highly rostering Jackson Dart. The running back room is all Henry Parrish. He's got kind of a stranglehold there. Scored 7 rushing touchdowns so far. He's a little bit of an interesting leverage play. I think the Ole Miss passing game will be somewhat popular, not mega chalk by any means, but I do think Dart and Harris will see some ownership, whereas Parrish probably won't see any. So there's some interest there for me in GPPs. Speaking of Trey Harris, the volume master, leads the team in targets with 45. He is having just an outrageous year. 38 catches for 628 yards and 4 touchdowns. Yes. That is not, I had to look that over several times because, it's only been 4 games. And the fact that he's well over 600 receiving yards, it's just absolutely ridiculous. This receiving room has Juice Wells, Caden Lee, Jordan Watkins, who's pretty solid at tight end, our guy Caden Prieskorn. Like, there is a lot of different options here, but they are just continually peppering Trey Harris. So he is the volume, and then you have Juice Williams, who is the efficiency in this receiving room. 19 targets, but 14 catches, 274 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Really strong receiving room here for Dart. It's easy to see why he has a Heisman candidate and he's putting up such ridiculous numbers. Without Quinshon Judkins, who's now over in Ohio State, they've been able to kind of change themselves a little bit. They're still using the running game, but they're very reliant on Dart and his arm, and he is looking the part. So I'm definitely intrigued, want some pieces of this. I think it'll be a little bit more popular than people expect it to be just because these prices are so high for these guys. But you can easily get in your Dart lineups Juice Wells, who's only 5K. I mean, 4,100 less than Trey Harris. Yes, Trey Harris is putting up games of 40 plus like he's Nick Nash. But, you couldn't get the game where Juice, maybe he catches the 2 touchdowns. So it's worth that at 5K using him as your Dart pair partner if you want to go that route, just because the fact that Dart's 9.8. Putting him with Trey Harris is going to be very, very difficult. We do have some underpriced options here, but the top end guys that we want are all really, really high priced above 8K. So that's going to be a little bit more difficult than you probably want it to be. And then you have Caden Prieskorn there at 4K, who's pretty much going to be a touchdown or bust. He only has the 1 so far this year. He's not getting the targets that we kind of expected him to get since he's healthy. But again, Harris is just being peppered so very heavily. There's not a lot going around to the other guys. Better to maybe just bet Ole Miss outright and maybe even the over here than it is to play them in DFS, but I'm certainly going to have some Ole Miss stacks in GPPs. Are you feeling like paying up for these guys, or are you going a little more economical?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, Dart is hard to get away from. He's tempting, but he's also, you got to be really sure about, him and this game staying, competitive and close. And so, it's a lot of ways for it to go right for him. He's going to be pretty involved no matter what. There's there might be some spots I like a little bit more.
All right, moving on, we have the Terrapins of Maryland against the Hoosiers of Indiana. Total of 52. Indiana 7-point favorites right now. I don't know, man. This is one that I feel like Maryland might surprise some people. Indiana hasn't really played anyone to this point, so it'll be a good litmus test for them. But I feel like either way, this is going to be a pretty entertaining game one way or another. What do you think?
Yeah, 100%. This is one of those games that the DFS enthusiasts will appreciate. I think there will be a lot of points, not a lot of defense in this one. It's kind of one of those games where, like, if I have the ability to turn on control of the offensive coordinators, I would say, hey, can you guys just pass the ball all the time in this game? Because we have some pretty talented quarterbacks who've shown their mettle so far this season, in Rourke and Edwards, and some extremely talented receivers. Obviously, our man Ty Felton popping off in week 1 and continuing to be a beast throughout the season thus far. That's been great to see. And on the Indiana side, there's variety of receivers. Surratt is probably the top guy for me. It is a little bit more mix and match on that side, as opposed to the clear top option being Ty Felton on the Maryland side. It kind of it's gonna come down to feel and how your lineup construction works and who you feel fits. But you're right, Indiana, we haven't seen them play anyone. Not that Maryland is some, defensive stalwart by any means, but we also, we don't know what their offense looks like when it has to play a full game, and they don't just turn it over to salt away the clock, starting in the third quarter. So I think there is, Curtis Rourke went 304 in a game that they won by 30 points. And so what do we think he can do if he's, having to pass for the entire game, and the other team is actually able to keep up and score points against Indiana? It could be interesting to see the way that works out. And he's in play for me, as is Edwards. He's probably got some mobility stored up in there somewhere. We've seen it in the past when he was in the MAC. We haven't seen it just yet. Hasn't had to do much of it at Indiana, and certainly not against UCLA last week. But I think that he's a really interesting call, and even fully stacking this game using both quarterbacks and at least one pass catcher from either side is also in play. The running games, different story, a little bit more diverse than I would like to see, especially on the Indiana side with Ellison and Lawton. I don't necessarily have a lean that I need to get to either of those. I kind of would just like to see all of the fantasy goodness happen via the pass, and that could be wishful thinking, but I'm hoping that that's the way that it plays out in this one, and we stack up the quarterbacks and receivers and counter money that way.
Yeah, Billy Edwards has been really good. I feel like people are kind of overlooking him, and the price 7.7, maybe a little bit uncomfortable for some, but the passing volume's been there. Obviously, Felton's having a great year, and Caden Prather, who's only 4 or 5, is starting to come on. So definitely an interesting game. Be curious to see how the ownership shakes out in that direction. All right, moving on, we have Oklahoma State versus Kansas State. Total of 57.5 right now. K-State 5-point favorites. The terrible O-line play for the Cowboys has caused Ollie Gordon to become obviously unplayable. I am still going to waste one lineup in GPPs rostering him because I'm pot committed at this point. But yeah, it's obviously really dire straits. We probably should have seen it coming in week 1 when he had the 3.9 YPC and scored a couple touchdowns. So that was great. But overall, it's been a tough season for him. And Oklahoma State's been winning to this point, but the Utah game, and they pushed Utah, so I'm good on them. But the running game is just it's dead. I do think that Alan Bowman is capable of putting together a 25 plus fantasy point game, but I'm certainly not going to be using him. Brendan Presley's up over 7K. He's been the best option. Deshaun Stribling is getting a lot of targets, like 5.8's a good look for him. But mainly I'm just looking at the Kansas State side here. And we know, since week 1, we saw how the running back for South Dakota State only had 9 carries, but he rushed for over 70 yards, kind of made us look like, maybe this Oklahoma State rush defense, something's wrong here. And we saw Jaquindon Jackson rush for 150-3 a few weeks back against them. The big point of contention for me going into it was they're playing Utah running backs, will get rugged. They'll end up playing Jelon Glover 50 snaps or something, but whoever plays is going to have a big game. And it ended up being Micah Bernard, who, 20 plus carries, 182 yards. This is a very strong DVP spot. Right now, Oklahoma State's giving up 180 yards per game on the ground. They're also relinquishing 280 yards through the air per game. So defensively, they're terrible. There's a myriad of ways that Kansas State can succeed here. My favorite plays are going to be DJ Giddens, obviously, as a main team look, and then Dylan Edwards as a GVP kind of alt look. Looking at the prices, Giddens gotten up there. This DK's done a pretty nice job of pricing these guys up. So again, if you're looking at Ole Miss passing game, you're probably not going to have the ability to go up here and pay 8.5 for Giddens, who, got roughed up. BYU's defense really stacked up well. They shut K-State down, and it was a bit surprising for myself and many others. Still, Giddens almost had 100 yards even in that game. I like him for 125 plus yards against this Oklahoma State team, 18 to 20 touches at minimum. He'll add a few receptions as well. He's a very strong pay up if you want to go that way. And I would go him over Dart personally, even though I'm very high on Ole Miss, just because of my affinity for running backs. Edwards is 6K, so it's a little spendy for him. But again, I think Giddens will be somewhat popular, somewhere in that 15 to 20% ownership range. Edwards could very easily score 2 touchdowns. If he's the one that, kind of vultures those touchdowns away from Giddens, suddenly you have a situation where 20% owned Giddens gets 12, Edwards at 2% gets 20, and you have a big stat leg up on the rest of the field. He just doesn't get the same level of carries, but he's definitely very heavily involved as a pass catcher. So those are going to be the 2 guys who can take full advantage. You can also look to Avery Johnson, who was obviously awful. He's having some difficulties with his accuracy so far. We know the mobility is there. He had another 74 yards on the ground against BYU. So there's value, but he's in that pricing bucket, which it looks like DK. We talked about this a lot last week. That 7.8 to 8.5 range. That's just kind of where the quarterbacks are going to be. So you have to decide, do you want to play Avery and hope he's the one that gets all the rushing work against Oklahoma State or scores the touchdown? Certainly possible. He hasn't been calling his number in terms of in the red zone. They've just been giving it to Giddens or Edwards. So he hasn't had any rushing touchdowns in the season just yet. And again, his accuracy issues throwing the football have led to some pretty bad mistakes, which were included 2 interceptions in that last game. He did lose one of his favorite targets last week to an injury. It's going to be out for a couple of weeks. One of his tight ends, Braden Lofton. You can look at Garrett Oakley, who's going to see more snaps now. He was the one that we thought would step into that high volume tight end role for this team. And then also Will Swanson. But as far as any other receivers in this room, GPP wise, you can sprinkle a little Jace Brown. You can look to a little Keegan Johnson. They're all under 5K, but they're very lean plays to me. There are some other cheapies. Even Prather in the Maryland game, who's under 5K, I would much rather play him over Jace Brown, even though I'm a big Jace Brown guy, just because I think the passing volume is a little safer there for the Maryland offense. So I'm all over Giddens. I'll have some Edwards. I'm going to be on the Giddens props in Underdog Battle Royale lineups. I have 1 million shares of Giddens, just really, really strong. DVP kind of rules things for me, and I just keep attacking a spot that works. And this is a spot that continues to work, as evidenced by Micah Bernard last week. So I will be on Giddens, and I'll have to figure out just how I'm going to make this lineup work with all these high-priced options. Luckily, there's another running back whose price is very questionable. We can make this work, but I'm on the Giddens train there. And I have a feeling you're probably somewhat high on him as well.
Yeah, like him, obviously, tough week for Avery. I think we see some bounce back there. But I do think that because of that, maybe they game plan a little bit more to Giddens, and we get a high end need to have it kind of performance out of him. I see that happening all day.
Love it. All right, moving on. We have Minnesota versus Michigan, and this has very Iowa-esque feel to it. Although the Iowa offense was juiced up last week. Love to see it. Minnesota was the one that struggled. It's a 35.5-point total. Not great. Michigan comes in as 10-point favorites. I think there's some playability here, but obviously the total is going to turn a lot of people off. Not great from the Minnesota side by any means. Brosmer's looked pretty good throwing the football. Taylor's a weapon, we know that. But what can we actually do with this game?
Yeah. You know what? I don't think I can fade Caleb Johnson anymore. I think going back to the Iowa point, you've been on him since he was like 4.2, and he's going to be like 10K before the season's over, and we got to stay on that train. So great job calling that one early. As far as this game goes, I would love to say, you know what, we can play Darius Taylor and he's going to run 35 times. I just don't see it working out. I see the game being a little bit too physical for Minnesota to keep up with, which was very much the same point that I made last week with USC. They were going to struggle with the physicality, and they put together some offense, but it was not the offense that we're used to seeing from Lincoln Riley teams, and ultimately at the end of the day, they didn't have quite enough physicality to get it done. Mullings absolutely did. Mullings is the man. I think we were right on it from the very beginning when Edwards was like 1K more than Mullings, and we're like, are we sure he's the better guy? I don't really know that he is. And now we've seen what Mullings can do when given, not quite the feature role. Like, I don't think we're ever going to get 30 carries out of him, but even if we get 18 to 20, maybe with some passing work, and they certainly aren't going to be throwing the ball downfield, not with Alex Orji. So we're going to see a lot of Mullings in this one. I think Michigan's going to be successful. And it's not going to be, the flashiest game, but if you just need production from one guy, and you're not game stacking it, I think Mullings can still absolutely get there. 150 and 2 is basically what I would expect from him, and that seems like a pretty good game. But at low sevens price point, that plays. I think that can work out. So maybe a narrower path than we want, but I think they realize what they have in him now, and they also realize what they have in Orji. So they're going to need to pound the rock and let the O-line go to work and get the job done on the ground quite a bit. And I think that speaks exactly to what Mullings can do and should lead to a lot of output for him.
Yeah, I love the Mullings play. I'm not quite sure yet if this is like going to be a DVP spot, but I think high volume backs are going to pretty much torture Minnesota. Talking to a few of our subs that are big Minnesota fans, they kind of tend to agree, and obviously it helps Mullings coming into it,
which is odd because like that's all they practice against. They don't they don't have a passing game really to speak of. You'd think if they could do one thing, it would be stop the volume running game, but so far haven't been able to do it.
Yeah. So I'm all on the Mullings play too. Gonna have some of his props, but see how it fits. But in total agreement, he's the one to look at, and it's just a sad for me because I really do like Donovan Edwards, but just not the same type of guy that Corum was, and just not built to be the one handling this huge workload, which is unfortunate, but we had to accept it. All right, moving on. We have Nebraska versus Purdue. Total of 48, not super high. Nebraska coming in as 10-point favorites. Nebraska, they dropped a tough one to Illinois. It was a gutted out game there that they just, couldn't win out on. But I think they get a really nice bounce back spot here against a Purdue team that, I don't think is going to win another game the rest of the season, and believe they'll finish a 1-11. So I think we see Nebraska cover this 10 points and be pretty in control. I don't think that equates to a Dylan Raiola game in which he throws together a huge score. He is somewhat interesting at only 6'4". He's shown, as a true freshman, he's definitely the guy. And if you get somewhere between 18 to 20 points of that 6'4", you're doing just fine there. Purdue's going to be a team that just you can throw on them easily. You can run on them easily. You can do whatever you want. But I kind of see this one playing out like with Oregon State last week, where Oregon State just ran all over Purdue. And Hankerson was the guy that a lot of us were on in that night slate. He was super chalky. His counterpart, Jam Griffin, he went even more bonkers. They had 2 guys go over 80 yards. The Nebraska running game can be a little bit of an intimidating thing because there are, quite a few options. Gabe Ervin, we know that Emmett Johnson can do some things. Ramir Johnson, more of a pass catcher, but he's in there. But I do think Dante Dowdle is borderline main team playable. Only 5.6 on DraftKings. It's not just because he toted the rock 20 times last week, but that certainly helps. In a close game, he was the one that they really turned to. His YPC wasn't anything impressive, but that workload certainly has my attention. Starting to assert himself. They're using Ramir Johnson as like short yardage type guy in pass catching situations. Gabe Ervin's getting, some of that short yardage work. And then we're seeing Emmett Johnson just kind of sparingly as a change of pace type of guy. Dowdle's really the kind of just, lunch pail guy that they're going to give the bulk of the carries to. Last week, he had 50% of the snaps at the running back spot, which is more than enough. And then overall, he's now gotten 41% of the total carries, which, the beginning of the season, he had 5 to 6 carries. Now he's worked his way up to 20. If he gets a workload close to 20 or, 20 touches in some form or fashion, I think he absolutely assaults this 5.6 price point. I don't believe that a lot of people are even going to be looking at him. If anything, I think people are going to go to Rayola, Nair, some of the passing work here, and Dowdle just gives us a really nice opportunity to have some leverage against that. And if you go through his logs, you'll see he's been in a double-digit score pretty much throughout. He had the North Iowa game that was just a quick blowout. You didn't really get a lot of work, just 6 carries. You can toss that one out. Very productive, scored twice against Colorado. Semi-blowout against UTEP, he scored there, and then he had the huge workload against Illinois, and he also caught a couple of passes, which was encouraging for me. So I'm pretty high on Dowdle. I've been drafting him a bit on Underdog. Like I said, he's borderline main team play for me. I'm not sure if I'll actually get to that spot, but this is definitely a very good DVP point. Purdue just can't stop anyone. This is a very bad football team. It's not the Purdue, Aiden O'Connell fun teams that we had from years past. This is a really, really ugly team. Their receiver room is awful. Their quarterback play is awful. Hudson Card, I'm taking all of his unders this weekend. It's just real bad. It was encouraging to see our guy Devin Maccabee wake up a little bit, racked up 168 yards on 16 carries against Oregon State, scored a touchdown, and he's really cheap. So I don't know if people will go there. Had a little Maccabee on the night slate last week, but this is just such a tough matchup. Nebraska defensively, they've been very stout. They held their own against a very good Colorado offense. And I think Purdue is going to struggle to get anything going. A lot of 3 and outs. And I think Hudson Card's going to try and hero ball it in the second half and end up getting picked off a lot. And that just means Dowdle is going to get a lot of work, chew up the clock, and end up paying off that 5.6. So that's the way I'm approaching this one. You look at the receiver room for Nebraska, certainly some options against this defense of Purdue, and there's some guys who can quick strike. Nair at only 5.2. I mean, he can do some things. We saw Jamal Banks coming into the season. I really questioned him being some sort of high volume alpha from Wake Forest, but he did have 8 for 94 against Illinois, and that was a close game. So perhaps, Banks is starting to wake up a little bit there. Pretty solid. They have the youngster Ja'Cory Barney, who I really like. I think he's going to be very good in the future. And then Tommy Fedone, their tight end, that they look at as a safety valve. But it's Dowdle for me, and I think he will creep into my main lineup when it's all said and done. Do you have anything to add to this one? Betting wise, it just looks like such a strong spot for Nebraska. Oh, talking. There you are. You're back.
Okay.
Didn't even realize you were gone. Didn't even realize you were gone. Talking.
Yeah, no, switch back over to laptop, and I was like, hey, I need to get back in. I think you're right on it with Dowdle. I would love it to see like Rayla blow up, very, very invested in him. I don't necessarily think they'll need it in this one. But yeah, that price tag is pretty intriguing on Dowdle. And we've seen one good Ramir Johnson game. I don't know when the next good Ramir Johnson game is going to happen. Could be this one. I don't know. But I think Dowdle is definitely the more blue chip play on this one.
Yeah, for sure. If Ramir gets there, it's going to be from the pass catching stuff, which can work. I just wish it would be a little bit cheaper. All right, we're going to move on to the Arkansas versus Texas A&M game. 52.5 total. The Aggies 5.5 favorites. It's another kind of betting spot that I like in favor of the Aggies. What do you think here? Taylor Green just let us down. Tough matchup. Can you bounce back? And who are some of the guys that you like?
Yeah, you know what? I think we did expect a lot from Taylor Green. Didn't quite get there. It wasn't like a bad game, but from fantasy perspective, just didn't get what we needed to get from him. We've seen a lot more consistency than I think I would have expected out of Jaquindon Jackson so far this year. I liked him better when he was like 5'2". At 7'1", it's like, well, now we need like 100 and maybe 150 and a touchdown in order for him to be relevant, right? So it's definitely not like an auto Jaquindon Jackson spot the way that we've had some in earlier in the season. And then I don't know quite what happened with Andrew Armstrong last week either. That was probably the play that I felt had the highest floor, just because of the way that he was peppering, way that Taylor Green was peppering him going into it. And then for him to only get, five catches and less than 50 yards, like that is a huge letdown. And I had some pretty good lineups that had Andrew Armstrong be the one piece that just completely didn't cooperate with the rest of the lineup. And that was a tough pill to swallow. That said, I think they're going to go back to the well. I don't know who else is going to have that big game. I mean, do we see another 30-yard per catch game out of Isaiah Satania? Do we trust him to do big things in the vertical passing game? Does Isaac Tesla, start catching some big plays, or do they go back to the guy that like put up 200 against Oak State? I think it's going to be Andrew Armstrong, man. I think it's going to be Taylor Green and Andrew Armstrong in this one. They're going to have to throw the ball a little bit more to keep up. I think Jaquindon Jackson will get his. I think he'll be involved, but I don't think we're going to see necessarily, a huge 30-point upside type of game from him. And then on the other side, A&M. Can we just like make Marcel Reed the guy going forward and commit to that? That's another thing that I would just like to have I can be the coach in the video game and say that, okay, yes, now Marcel Reed has proven he is the better quarterback and he gets the job going forward. That's so much more comfortable. And this offense is going to flow so much better. And yes, he's played, some pretty weak defenses, but he's just great for fantasy, man. Running the ball as much as he does, having as much success running the ball, getting in the end zone on the ground. Like he's everything you want in DFS quarterback. He's everything that we like about Taylor Green, and he gets to play Arkansas as opposed to getting to play A&M. So if we don't have Weigman, I really kind of want to be interested in Marcel Reed. I know he's not 4,500 like he was the first week that we had the opportunity to play him, but at 7K, man, that's pretty enticing. And it's just, we got to get that clarity. In the running back room for A&M, it's difficult for me to stick with the conviction of like, hey, I think this is going to be a big Lev Moss week. There's so many other versions of what A&M can do, especially with Marcel Reed running the football as much as he is now. It's hard for me to really get to Lev Moss, even at a reduced price at 6K. And we've seen Arkansas sell out to stop the run, especially like they did against Ollie, and have the passing game just go absolutely bonkers in place of that. So I probably am not going to get to an A&M running back, if we're being honest. And even Marcel Reed's receiving options, they're all kind of that mid-range receiver Cyrus Allen seems to be the one that has the most efficiency thus far, but none of them really have any volume. Ja'Day Walker, I mean, there's not much there. He had 6 catches the first game, but for like no yards against Notre Dame. And, this most recent game against Boulder, it's 45-yard game. Like that's his high on the season, right? So like, what are we doing there? It's just a lot of unpredictability on the A&M receiving game, and I think I could just I would be just as fine doing a naked Marcel Reed and moving on the A&M side.
Yeah, I had some Cyrus Allen exposure and on FanDuel on the night slate, and that didn't go well. He had 3 targets, but man, he just couldn't get open against Bowling Green. It was really disgusting and disturbing to watch because I thought he was going to break out a little bit. I do want to mention Jabray Barber. He's the big receiver from Troy. His snaps are ramping up, and if coach speak is to be believed, sometimes it can't be. They're going to start jamming him in there more and working him out. So I know he hasn't done a whole lot statistically speaking yet. They were kind of bringing him along because of the foot issue. But I think I might be willing to take a few shots with him at 3.8 and 4.6 on FanDuel. But far from a safe play by any means, like you said. All right, next game, Oklahoma versus Auburn. Right now, it's Auburn +1 and a 45 total. I have already slammed Auburn a few times. This is just turning into a disaster. Oklahoma's 3-1, so what can you say? But the game last week, man, the Jackson Arnold experience. It was bad. And despite being 3-1, Coach Venables and the staff have decided to bench him for now. His performance against the Vols is completely unacceptable. I had like -3 fantasy points. People getting their jokes off. They gave up Dylan Gabriel for this, whatever. But and I even made the joke that Jackson Arnold would be a great Sun Belt quarterback next year. It remains to be seen if he'll actually stay on the bench. But the true freshman, and this is the year of true freshmen because there's about 4 true freshman quarterbacks making things happen this year in P4. And like a couple of true freshman receivers also. It's the true freshman season. But Michael Hawkins, he's going to get the start here. Going up against Auburn's not a great place to do so. Taylon Green showed us, Auburn's defense can be legit. And Green, he's only really 44% completion rate last week in the past 2 weeks. So I could see this being a little bit of a tougher spot for Oklahoma in general, but Hawkins, I think, is going to be the truth eventually. 61% of his passes completed against a very tough Vols defense, 132 yards, a touchdown. He also rushed for 22 yards, but he's definitely mobile. They are calling him the freaky fast, like he's a sandwich delivery driver, but there's a lot of confidence in his dual threat abilities. And I don't think it'll be a situation where if he struggles, they'll immediately go back to Arnold. I think they're going to let Hawkins figure it out. The offensive coordinator for Oklahoma is named Seth Luttrell, formerly the head coach at North Texas from 2016 to 2022. Very well-known offensive dynamo. Mason Fine was his quarterback at North Texas, 4-year starter, set multiple passing records, and he wasn't a mobile quarterback. And they would joke in those days that, like, if Luttrell had a mobile quarterback, and Fine said that about himself, like, it would have opened up things even more. Now he has that. Obviously, it's going to take some work here, and throwing him into the fire at Auburn is going to be tough. But I think Hawkins is a guy that we at least need to be aware of. Maybe check out some of his props, but have him in the scope for future or in the use, or even some GBP lineups, because I do think he's going to usurp Jackson Arnold for the rest of the season. Unfortunately for him, the Sooners running back game has really, really struggled. They're going to be without one of their most effective options in Taylor Tatum. He's outright just not there. Gavin Sawchuk has not been the guy. I actually wouldn't be surprised if Sawchuk ended up transferring next year as well. And then Joe Barnes, who's been there forever, they're still forcing him out there. But overall, the running game, it's real tough. And then you go to their receiver room, and there's some guys there, but the injury bug has hit hard. We already know they're going to be without Jaleel Farouk for quite a while. Andrew Anthony's been listed as doubtful forever, but now he is out as well and hasn't been playing. Nick Anderson, who's been in and out, he's out. And now we got the news just a couple of hours ago that Deion Burks, their star wideout and one of the only players that you can really count on in this team right now, is also going to be out. So all of the major weapons and arguably their most athletic running back are all out, with a true freshman on the road, an exciting true freshman at quarterback, but minimal weapons. He has the deep threat in Brennan Thompson, I guess, the tight end that he's probably going to lean on, Bauer Sharp. I think Bauer Sharp at 3.7 is probably a realistic main team play, because I think Hawkins is going to be peppering him. And if you look to the Tennessee game, 4 catches for 36 yards. I know it's not a great stat line, but 8 to 9 fantasy points at that price will work. And once Hawkins stepped into the game, he looked to Bauer Sharp often. That was his baby blanket. And we know freshmen, tight ends, that's kind of a simpatico thing that we can lean on. Jake Roberts is another tight end that he'll probably look to as well. I don't like him quite as much as Bauer Sharp. I think Sharp's much more of a consistent option, and it's definitely a main team viable guy if you want to go that route. I know tight ends can be lackluster and maybe not possess the upside that you need in tournaments, but he definitely is a safety valve here. The Auburn side, and so betting Auburn, it's like I don't believe they're going to be +1 for one thing. So I'm betting Auburn a lot. I do like my man Jarquez Hunter. He's cheap again at 6.3. He finally blasted off against New Mexico, but that was New Mexico. Arkansas did a really nice job containing him, just the 67 yards on 12 carries. That was just a really physical game. Defenses were, scoring. It just really wasn't a lot of opportunities for either offense. Hunter hasn't really had a very good season to date, but I do think this is a game where they go to him 20 plus times. He's probably not going to make it to my main lineup, but you have to remember Hunter was a very safe option last year. The quarterback play for Auburn is continuing to be abysmal. Hank Brown, who, was really good in New Mexico for Peyton Thorne. Then he turned around. He was really bad against Arkansas. They panicked and went back to Peyton Thorne, who did okay, did get picked off, but he threw for 213 and 2 touchdowns. That kind of ruined things for Hunter. I like Hunter better if Brown is playing more than I do Thorne, but right now quarterback play for Auburn is just a mess. Somehow Keandre Lambert-Smith continues to be effective. He had 5 receptions for 156 yards and 2 touchdowns against Arkansas. His third time this year having double-digit fantasy points, and he's had no fewer than 9. So he's definitely an option if you want to look to him. At only 5'9", I think he'll probably project pretty well. We're getting to a point, I think next week I'll be able to share the projections fully. But I do think Lambert-Smith is a pretty decent option. And also the tight end, Rivaldo Fairweather at 2.7, 440. Touchdown time that line. He can give that to you at a cheap price of 3.7 at 1%. Overall, not a great game to target, more so wanting to bet this one, but there are options on both sides. But man, it's crazy to think that a 3-1 Oklahoma team is just, they look so awful. And I'm starting to question if they can even win, 6 to 7 games. They'll be bowl eligible, but this is not a team that I think is going to win 9 or 10 games like some people thought after week 1. Do you have any additional takes on this one, or do you want to move forward?
Yeah, I like the Bauer Sharp call. That receiver room is as depleted as you can get, and he's going to be like the only guy left standing that that Hawkins is going to be able to be comfortable with. And so I do like that call at all. I like Keandre Lambert-Smith in a vacuum. I would like if Peyton Thorne was not also in that same vacuum, but that's the hand that we're dealt. And at 5'9", he's been pretty explosive. We've been on him since the Penn State days, and he's shown up pretty consistently and able to have those big games. I also just generally, this Oklahoma team, they kind of feel like the anti-BYU. Like they are the team that everything negative is happening to at once. Quarterback controversy, all kinds of injuries. We don't know where our running back is. Like it's just it's a really big problem. And it seems like things are on a downward trend. And when that happens, team like Auburn can smack you. Even though they don't have all the talent in the world at the quarterback position, they still know how to take care of business at, especially on the D line, and that can be trouble for a young quarterback trying to make his way that doesn't have any receivers. So yeah, love the Auburn side of the bet as well, especially at home.
All right, now we're moving on to a game that should be uber popular. We have a lot of games in the 40s and the 50s, but we've got Colorado taking on UCF, two teams that have felt defense has been somewhat optional. They give up lots of points. We have a total of 62. UCF comes in as a 14-point favorite, and there's all kinds of fantasy goodness, but they're expensive. So how do we fit these guys, and who are you prioritizing for us?
We fit them by using Bauer Sharp from Oklahoma. We got to get those low value receiver plays that are going to pump up the volume to let us play RJ Harvey, man. RJ Harvey had 29 carries for 180 yards and 2 touchdowns, another score on the ground, or another score in the passing game, in a game that was decided by 1 point. There are 2 touchdown favorites, and they're going up against a team who can't stop the run at all. How does RJ Harvey not go for 300 yards in this game? Like he's going to have every opportunity. They give Penny Boone like 5 carries a game, and they can't commit fully to stopping him, because then KJ Jefferson will just take off and run the ball for 200 yards himself, which, that's an interesting way to look at this one. If we see Colorado sell out to stop the run, well, you might just still be able to run on Colorado. So I don't know that's going to be a whole heck of a lot of change. But if they are successful in stopping RJ Harvey, it's going to be because KJ Jefferson pulled a bunch of read options and ran for like 60 yards a carry himself. There is no way that this Colorado defense, as patchwork as they are, will be able to stop both of those guys. So I think you look at this one like you looked at Oklahoma State early in the season, and you say, okay, I'm going to take one lineup and I'm going to play Ollie, and I'm going to take the other lineup and I'm going to play the passing game. The difference is you don't have to play Alan Bowman when you play UCF and you do that. You can play KJ Jefferson, who is actually fun to use in DFS, and he only throws to one receiver. So it's like the epitome of what you want in DFS in terms of high volume, high efficiency, concentrated production, and a team that can actually put up points on the other side. Like, it's perfect, other than the fact that everybody costs like $9,000 or more. So to recap, there's only 3 guys you want on the UCF side, and that's Jefferson, Harvey, and Kobe Hudson. And you only want Kobe Hudson if you're playing him with Jefferson. That pairing is actually reasonably affordable. Let's talk about the other pairing that's not affordable. Shedeur and Travis Hunter, and they've been on the night slate that I write up, just about every slate. So I've just kept the same 2-line paragraph in there about Travis Hunter every week. Like, look, he's Travis Hunter. If you can play him, because he's fantastic and gets all the volume in the world. And frankly, I think should be higher in the Heisman race than he is. I understand he plays for a team that nobody thinks is any good, but when was the last time we saw a guy like this? I don't know. Charles Woodson. He won a Heisman. So Shedeur at 9.4. Look, if you need 30 points, Shedeur is going to get you 30 points. If you need 50 points, Shedeur is going to get you 30 points. If you can make 30 points work at 9.4 with the rest of your lineup, he's a pretty safe bet for 30 points. I think I take KJ on the other side of it a whole lot, because he's got a little bit more upside than those 30, just because he can break those long runs. Shedeur doesn't really do that. If you have an inkling to play Shedeur, you should probably just play Travis Hunter instead. The issue with that is that Travis Hunter costs you more than everybody else by a whole heck of a lot. 10-1 is, I think, the highest receiver price I've seen ever. Do you remember anybody being priced higher than 10-1 at the receiver position?
Yeah, because I don't think so. I don't know that Jamison Williams got up there, but I don't think he ever got to 10K. And
I
same with
knew
Marvin.
we would see Devontae at like 9 or 9,200 or JMO got up there. And then like back in the old school days, like with those Baylor teams with Corey Coleman, like we would see him be up there in like the 93, 94. I don't think I've ever seen anybody over 10. But he deserves it. Like he is the Shohei Ohtani of college football. And it's 100 yards every game. 10 catches is more likely than it isn't. Getting in the end zone is pretty likely. I don't know if you get points if he runs back a touchdown. If he has a pick six, you probably don't. But he might do that too, just for good measure. If you can get to him in any way possible, you got to get to him. He's amazing, especially if you're using any of Jefferson, Hudson, or Harvey on the other side. The only way that those guys are getting to their ceiling is if Travis Hunter has a game and, Shedeur force feeds him targets. You can pretty much completely ignore the Colorado running game. They don't really like doing that a whole lot, and they're going to be chasing points in this one so much that it's not going to matter a whole lot that they didn't want to do it in the first place, because the game script will dictate that they don't really have an opportunity to do that anyhow. Can't really get to Jimmy Horn Jr. at his price. You haven't really seen the volume from him. LeJontay Wester, had the big touchdown at the end of the game, tied the game. I think we see him pretty popular because of that, 5,900, that same price that we saw Keandre Lambert-Smith in the Auburn game. If you were to play Shedeur and you wanted to go a really weird route, which would be not using Travis Hunter with your Shedeur, which is, prohibitively expensive, but I understand doing it. I kind of like the idea of going with Wester instead to save yourself some money and actually be able to afford the UCF guys on the other side, and then just hope and pray that they're able to keep Travis Hunter to like a 7 catches for 96 yards and no scores, which is still a decent game, but certainly doesn't pay off the 10K. And that those long touchdowns, those long 40-plus yard touchdowns go to Wester, and he gets a couple of them because of all the attention that they're going to be giving Travis Hunter. So LeJontay Wester is definitely of interest. Will Shepherd, haven't really seen him do a ton. We have seen, the one game against Colorado State, 7 catches, 61 yards. Haven't seen him get in the end zone yet, though. They do very much look to Hunter and Wester when they get close. And then Omarion Miller, we saw him show up for a couple catches, one long catch for a touchdown against Baylor at 3.9. He's definitely not a stable asset. He'll be very volatile. He'll either get you that 15 to 20 point game, or he'll get you nothing. So he's extremely deep GPP play only for me. But you can definitely use more pieces on the Colorado side in the receiver room than just Travis Hunter, or pair one of those cheaper guys with Travis Hunter and Shedeur if you're going all in on this game. But yes, like all aspects of this game, and it is definitely a week where sometimes we have weeks where we say, hey, we have all this value, nothing to spend it on. That's not the problem this week. We have guys that we can spend our money on. So if you feel like you've uncovered some value in other games, this is a really good game to spend your excess money on.
Yeah, I used Travis Hunter on FanDuel last week, and he was kind of, putting around for the first 3 quarters. I was like, great, I paid 10K on FanDuel for him because their prices do go up there. And then he had a pretty nice fourth quarter. But yeah, if you play the fade, I think there is a definite path there, right? Like even if he breaks 100 yards, as long as he doesn't score a touchdown, if you keep him under like 25, 26 fantasy points at that price, you can get away with fading him. Certainly it doesn't make a lot of sense conventionally speaking to not play him if you're using Sanders, but I think Wester is obviously the one that unlocks that. And for GPPs, I mean, Shepherd, He was so good at Vandy, right? But it's just he's like the odd man out here quite often.
He's not getting the opportunity. I think he'd be great if they looked to him or threw to him or had him on the field, but he's not seeing the targets.
Yeah, just the total odd man out, and we're even seeing it affect Horn this year, where he blew up week 1, and then he's just been 4 catches, 30 yards. So it's the volume has been really concentrated to Hunter, as you mentioned, and Wester's clearly the number 2 option there. So hard not to use Hunter if you go Shedeur. I do like Shedeur a lot in this game, but yeah, I'll have to do some thinking. As far as UCF, you nailed it, man. Harvey, I think you got to play Harvey. Hudson's pretty expensive. Like, they run the football so much. Like, even look at Xavier Townsend, who's technically their WR2. He doesn't do a lot of pass catching, but they're giving him like 3 to 5 carries every game. And they give Miles Montgomery carries. They give Boone carries. They just run the hell out of the football. So I think you can get away with fading Hudson in this one, as far as you need to fade somebody in it to be able to fit. So I think Harvey's the way that I'm going to go. And I probably would imagine a lot of people are going to go that route as well. All right, moving on. We've got TCU versus Kansas, total of 59. Kansas 2-point favorites. This is one of my featured plays on my betting article. Not to the spread or anything, but the total of 59. I think that seems a little bit low. And I believe it opened at 59.5. It's gone down a half point. TCU just gave up 66 to SMU, who's had trouble at the quarterback position, but Jennings did just fine. And then you had mentioned the UCF game in which they played TCU. It was a 35-34 contest. I just don't know how we don't get 60-plus points out of these two teams playing. Going into it from a DFS standpoint, the TCU rush defense, the numbers are skewed. They're giving up about 150 yards per game right now, but they played Stanford in their first game, which Stanford doesn't know what they want to do at running back. Then they played an LIU team that obviously wasn't going to do anything. When they actually faced 2 teams with running backs who are elite, UCF, we saw Harvey go for 180 and 2, like you had mentioned. And then in last week's SMU game, again, 66 points behind Kevin Jennings, who only threw for 137 yards. Think about that. 66 points in the game. You would expect the quarterback to do some damage. 137 yards, 2 touchdowns. It was all Brashard Smith, 127 yards, 18 carries to get there, which is a 7.1 YPC, and 3 touchdowns. So 2 top-shelf running backs absolutely detonating against TCU. When we get Kansas on a slate, we think there's a running back there that's pretty friendly to us that we like. Devin Neal, who we were all over last week, or at least I was. He wasn't very owned. He did end up having a nice game, but the chalk running backs in his spot, like Cam Scatterbo, ended up doing much more. Although Scatterbo did struggle on the ground, he ended up getting over 100 yards receiving. So he beat out Devin Neal. What are we rewarded with for that experience? A 6.6K Devin Neal against a TCU team that just got absolutely embarrassed by Brashard Smith and RJ Harvey. And you can maybe make the argument that Devin Neal isn't RJ Harvey, but he's certainly as good, if not better, than Brashard Smith. And he's a high volume back. Even with Daniel Highshaw back, who did steal a touchdown from him last week, we saw 27 carries from Neal, 3 targets. He had 23 carries against UNLV the game before that. In a projected closer game, we can expect him to have 25 plus carries, and he's only priced at 6.6K. Now, he was really cheap on FanDuel last week, much cheaper than all the tiers, running back talent-wise tiers for him. So I didn't understand that either. I played him everywhere, and it was kind of the same thing last week. Again, it didn't work out because he lost his touchdown to Highshaw, and Scatterbo caught a million passes. But Neal at 6'6" in this, what is obviously a clear DVP spot, has pass catching upside. The touchdowns are going to be a variant spot. It might be Daniels who scores them. It might be Highshaw, obviously. But, if Neal's going for over 100 yards in this matchup, that's a guarantee. It's just a matter of, is he going to score once? Is he going to score twice? Will he score 3 times like Bryson Daly did tonight for Army? That's on the table and a possibility. I don't know that we'll get Devin Neal at like 3% ownership like we did last week. That would certainly be nice. But it's another week where I'm just going to be all in on Devin Neal. And there's very few Kansas slates where I'm not all in on Devin Neal. And the threat of Daniel Highshaw will not scare me off. If he was priced at 8K, I might think about it a little bit more. If he was 8.5 like Giddens, the touchdowns are too high variance. maybe I go to get-ins because the matchup's just as good there. But no, at 6-6, I don't really have to do any thinking there. So I appreciate DK for doing that. Daniels is a fair price at 7-5 as well. You can go there if you want, if you think it's going to be a chalky Neal week, and we'll have some more information on that tomorrow evening. Then you can pivot over to Daniels, more of a GPP look. Luke Grimm is only 5'2", been the primary receiver for him. 19 plus DK points in 3 of his 4 games. Had another just massive performance against West Virginia. He actually took 3 carries last week. One of them went for 32-yard touchdown. That also kind of hurt Devin Neal. There was a few rushing cues there that took away from him. But yeah, all over my man Devin Neal. And then on the other side of TCU, got to definitely consider paying 8.5 for Josh Hoover, which I know might make some people say, what? He's not a mobile quarterback, but his just passing volume is so impressive. In that game against SMU, 28 of 43, 3 touchdowns. He also scored a rushing touchdown, even though he had -7 yards. So he will score from time to time on the ground, but 29, 18, 36, and 32 DK points. The only time he didn't put up a huge number was the blowout over LIU 45-0. Close games against Stanford and UCF puts up a huge score, and then they get their doors blown off by SMU, which forced him to have to throw. Threw for 52 attempts against UCF, 42 attempts against Stanford. So it's pretty much a guarantee that Devin Neal is going to rush for 100 yards in this game, and Josh Hoover is going to throw 40-plus times. As far as the running game goes, there's some love in the industry for Cam Cook. He's definitely talented. The pass blocking has been better than the rush blocking for TCU. And because of the fact that they've been in some games where they just have to shoot out, they're going away from Cook. He does have pass catching upside, and he has 8 receptions in the past 2 games, but he's a little bit pricey for his actual role. 6'2", it's only 400 more for Neal. We're probably not looking at 20 carries for Cook, somewhere between 12 to 15, which is fine. And he can definitely score some touchdowns. We had a 3-touchdown game earlier this season, but it's a little bit harder to get to him. And Trey Sanders, it's kind of weird, is just completely dead. At wide receiver, it gets fun. Jack Beck, he's really expensive after just a massive game against SMU. You probably, unless you've been paying attention to TCU games, haven't even realized what he's been doing. 9 for 200 against UCF with a touchdown. That could be Travis Hunter on Saturday, just so we know, just we're on the same page here. 8 for 166, 2 touchdowns against SMU. And then against Stanford, another close game, 6 for 139 and 1. The game against LIU was over at halftime, 2 catches for 11 yards. This will be a close one. So Beck, that 7-2 has to be in your player pool. Hoover with Beck is a great way to build. I think a lot of people will go with the Colorado UCF, as they should. And then there's some other stuff on this slate we can look at as we get to the end here. I think Texas is going to be kind of popular. But going with the TCU guys makes a lot of sense, and I think we'll get some leverage there. Savion Williams had a big week 1. He's kind of just been ordinary since, but he's 437 and 2 touchdowns against UCF, 19 fantasy points. That would get the job done at 5.8. And then we've been waiting for Eric McAllister. Talked in the Discord a little last week, just like, hey, McAllister's the big dude at Boise State. I mean, he's not going to be held down for long. He sort of woke up with 454 and 1 against UCF. Big games looming for him, and that big game came against SMU. 6 catches for 114 and 1. So just another option for TCU to throw the football to. They even have Mr. Fast, Speedy J.P. Richardson, who can take the top off the defense at any time. A lot of weapons here for Hoover to throw the football to, and I think that there is a GPP winner out there that can throw like a triple stack together or just kind of rotate through the different receivers with Hoover. McAllister at 4.8 looks really nice. I know it's going to look like a chase, but even if he had kind of a mediocre game last week, I like what he brings to the table, and he fits into this offense really well. He's hurting Savion Williams, so he's probably the 3rd in that line for me, but if you can fit Beck and Hoover together in a lineup somewhere, you absolutely should do it. And it's quite easy to run that back with Devin Neal, who's, again, only priced at 6.6. So recap, I'm going to be stacking this game in multiple ways, but Devin Neal will be in 100% of my lineups once again. I hope he's 3%, but I don't feel very confident that will be the case this week. So, but yes, a very fun game that I think goes way over 59 points. Do you have any additional thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, I like the Jack Beck call, man. He's like that guy that if you're ever watching a game and you see a quarterback just seems like glued to a specific guy, he's been that guy for them that season, and it's been interesting to see because I don't think that's really who we expected the number one receiver on TCU to be, but sometimes you just get some of that Nick Nash chemistry and magic happens. So it's been good to see.
All right, moving on, we have Wisconsin versus USC, total of 51, USC 15.5-point favorites. You were pretty much dead on with what you said was going to happen there in the USC game, and anyone that followed the betting advice enjoyed that. Had to give you USC once again. That's your team. You know them better than anyone, so break this one down for us against Wisconsin.
So is it crazy to say I think Wisconsin takes this game? 16-point underdogs.
I like them to cover, so I'm happy to hear you say that because I was going to bet them.
16-point underdogs, and let's talk about like why that is. So their last game they played Alabama, they got destroyed, they lost their quarterback, and then they got better because they lost their quarterback. Right, like they are no longer hamstrung by Tyler Van Dyke. They can get a little bit of the running game identity going, but I think the most important part of losing Van Dyke is that we get that Brady Locke and Will Pauling connection, and that is what is most relevant for DFS purposes, but also for the general flow of the Wisconsin offense. And I think the other part of that game that everyone's anchoring on for Wisconsin, them being hit so hard by Bama, Bama's defense is really good. Like I don't think people, because of the upside and the Heisman talk of Jalen Milroe, the focus being on the offense, Bama's defense is all really good. Wisconsin can't compete with that. USC's defense is not good. USC's defense lost badly to a team that basically said, we're just not passing. Like it's like when you're way better than your buddy at Madden and you say, okay, I'm not going to pass today. I'm still going to beat you. Michigan did that and still won. And like, that's just ridiculous. And that's how bad USC's defense is. I think people expect that like, oh, okay, USC's had a chance to evolve and get into their defense. No, they are still terrible on defense. And the difference between Bama and USC, like that's one of the widest differences in quality of defense you could have and still be staying with Power 5 teams. And Wisconsin lost badly, got better, now had time to prepare, with their backup quarterback as the QB1 for the entire week. And Braden Locke is probably better for beating a team like USC, that, they will be dominated on the ground. The ground game will keep the flow of the offense going, and he will stick to, short and intermediate passes that keep the chains moving and not try to hit the deep throws and play hero ball the way that Tyler Van Dyke sometimes would. He's going to play within the offense, and that means certainly double-digit targets, probably double-digit receptions for Will Pauling. So I don't mean to indicate that I'm going to play Braden Locke. That's not where I'm going with all this by saying that he's better. But I do think he's a lot better for Will Pauling. And I do think he's a lot better for the continuity of the offense in general. At 4,800, Will Pauling for me is one of the best plays on the entire slate. Price, factoring in price to that. I think we get like a 12, 130 and 1 line out of Will Pauling, and that would be pretty fantastic at just about any price, but especially at 4,800. And if there's so many paths to him having success. If Wisconsin gets up early, it's because they threw it to him. If Wisconsin gets down early, they're going to have to throw to him. There's not a lot of game scenarios other than him getting injured that he's not going to be extremely involved in the offense all the way through this one. And I think if we see the Wisconsin offense have the success that I'm predicting, he's going to get in the end zone at least once, if not multiple times.
So I love Will Pauling on this slate. As far as the rest of the Wisconsin offense, the back rotation is a little bit more than I'm comfortable with. Malusi obviously has some talent. They kind of scaled back his carries when they were getting beat by Bama, but even in competitive games, he's seeing 16 to 20 touches, which if he had the breakaway speed where he could break like a 50-yard touchdown, I would be comfortable with. We really are getting kind of, 4 to 6 yard carry type play from him, and we need him to get in the end zone once or twice, which I think he can do. We saw Mullings do that. But at 6,100, it's probably going to be a better move to find some money to get to Devin Neal, just because he has that upside. And Tawee Walker has taken some carries away, not a ton, and we've also seen K.D. Akameli be involved. So it's kind of a three-headed monster there. Don't love that for DFS purposes. I would rather see that get consolidated a little bit. On the SC side, Miller Moss, there will be times to use him down to 7,300. It is an attractive price point, but he doesn't really do as many of the things for DFS that we like. He doesn't really run the ball. He doesn't pull the ball down at the goal line. It's kind of, the running back show once they get inside the 10. You don't really love that from the DFS perspective. So I think he'll have a decent real life game. I don't love him for DFS purposes. I do like Woody Marks at 7,100. We do see a ton of volume from him. We see work in the passing game from him. I don't think USC is going to be dominated. I think that they will be in a competitive game. They ultimately will be decided one way or the other, in the fourth quarter. And so Woody Marks at 7,100 is going to get enough volume for that to be interesting. It's not a play I feel the need to force in, but it is one I'm interested in. And then got to go back to my guy, Zachariah Branch. He was, the one guy that showed up pretty positively. I guess Jacoby Lane got there too, but we have high expectations for Zachariah Branch. He's come down in price to 5K, and we saw him, getting a good amount of targets. Got 12 targets last game against Michigan. Only caught 6 of them, but almost got over that 100-yard barrier. Finished with 98 yards. If we see a good amount of volume from him, if you want to, throw a lineup in there with Marks and Branch on the SC side and Pauling on the Wisconsin side, that's a cost-effective way to get exposure to this game, where there is reasonably concentrated production. Jacoby Lane, another shout. Kyron Hudson, haven't really seen much from him. Makai Lemon is not going to play, I don't think, given the injury that he sustained last game. Deuce Robinson, we've been talking about Deuce Robinson for a long time. Haven't seen him do much so far this season, although he did get in the end zone last week. Lake McRae is going to miss this one as well, I believe. So maybe we see some consolidation of the USC pass catchers, which is something we've been looking for a long time. But I think I'm most interested in Branch on this one. Branch at 5K seems just too cheap to pass up on for his amount of explosiveness and what we saw Ryan Williams do to this Badger secondary over the top. So Marks, Branch, and Pauling for me as the main pieces from this one. And I'm going to say maybe Wisconsin winning outright is a little bit too aggressive, but I'm going to say they easily cover a 16-point spread, and they end up, on either side of a field goal different, either winning by 3 or less or losing by 3 or less in this one. So 16 is pretty comfortable.
Yeah, I love it. That was one of the bets I like for sure. I was going to ask you about Wisconsin around plus 15.5, plus 16, depending on where it is. So love hearing that. And yeah, at 4.8, that's was penciled in as one of my core receivers. So I will definitely agree with you there. Love it. And your USC analysis has been spot on, but figure since that's your team. All right, moving on here. We're going to go. We just have a couple of games left. Notre Dame versus Louisville. Total of 46. Notre Dame is currently a 7-point favorite. An interesting game. On the Louisville side, we liked last week Tyler Shuck. Didn't end up getting a lot to him. He was decent against Georgia Tech, 68% completion rate, 269 yards, 2 touchdowns. Jahori Brooks was mega chalk, which we expected at his really cheap 4.8 price, and he exploded for 4.1, 25 and 1. Now he's 5.7, a little bit more of a reasonable price, but a much tougher matchup. This Notre Dame defense is not a team that I like to target against very much. And as much as I like Jahori Brooks, don't think I can reasonably pay 5.7 for him against them. Jadon Thompson, who was their WR2 on paper for targets, did get injured, suffered a knee injury. He will be out for the rest of the season. That enabled Chris Bell to step into a larger amount of snaps. He did catch a long touchdown pass last week and worked out quite well. He's only 3.8. But the main thing I want to pay attention to here for Louisville is the fact that Colin Lacey, who is an absolute stud in the Sun Belt, is officially a game time decision. Now, he's only 4K on FanDuel min price, and he's only 3K on DraftKings the min price. It's Notre Dame, and there is far from a guarantee that him playing means more than 5 snaps, maybe a target. I mean, it's really, really difficult to say. It would almost be better coming into it if he just warmed up and then didn't start, then we could kind of just get away from it. But if he's, practicing fully tomorrow and the hype starts coming, because I know some of the other sites are going to start talking about him, we could see a really higher owned Lacey potentially. And I don't like that idea. I only like using him if he's just kind of like 5% max and I'm just sprinkling him into some GBP lineups, but I don't want to feel obligated to do so. However, with the amount of high price studs on the slate that we want to get to, a 3K Colin Lacey, even if he drops a bagel, isn't necessarily a death sentence. So I did want to point that out. Lacey is very good. In case you're not sure, he spent the last 4 years at South Alabama. He was a 1,300-yard receiver last year, 812 yards the season before that, and he just has progressively gone up from there. Very, very good. Obviously, within the next couple of weeks of playing, he's going to be a guy that we're using. He'll be higher priced, but it's just like, couldn't they be playing Georgia Tech again, or Virginia would have been a good one, but just Notre Dame, God, man, like that just makes it such a difficult decision. But he is cheap, and if we got him on the depth chart and we know he's going to suit up and play, so it's worth some exposure somewhere. Much more interested in the Notre Dame side. I think they're over the embarrassment there. Pretty tough schedule still ahead. So I think the playoff still is probably tough for them after that loss to NIU. But Riley Leonard, they've awoken the beast there. They've turned him loose. Very smart decision to let him run. Now, granted, they played Purdue, who again they're terrible. And then Miami of Ohio, who they did not want to have a repeat of losing to a MAC team. They smacked them around 28-3. Pretty solid passing outing for Riley Leonard. He completed 64 of his passes, 154 yards and a touchdown, but he once again got it going on the ground. 143 yards, 2 touchdowns. That was the encore performance after rushing for 103 the week before. Only priced at 7.9. If we think that running game is going to continue to happen, and Louisville's been pretty solid defensively as well, but if we think he continues to get that work running and things open up, he's a really nice option to use in your main lineup. He's a solid price, and you don't have to feel obligated to play him with anyone. So you have freedom with your various lineups, and it's been nice on Underdog, especially in those drafts, to just take Leonard late and not have to, pair him up anywhere. So I definitely like Leonard. I really like Jeremiah Love. He's 6K. I think he's kind of separated himself out. They didn't need him to do a lot last week, so just the 11 carries for 60 yards, but he scored his 4th straight touchdown. He's 4, 1 in each game. Don't think I'll probably get there for a main build, but he's definitely, like I said, has separated himself above price and is the guy there. And then as far as the receiver room goes, they got to use Chris Mitchell, man. Chris Mitchell was so good at FIU. Like I want to be on this breakout game that I think's coming for him, but I can't realistically use anyone from that Notre Dame passing game right now. So it's either a naked Riley Leonard or perhaps some Jeremiah Love. And then again, monitoring the Colin Lacey status leading up to Saturday, which I think will be a rather popular bit of news there leading up to lock. So we'll see what happens there with his collarbone. It's a later game lock, so if you decide to go that route and he doesn't play, you'll have to finagle multiple looks. But the good news is there's 7 games for you to choose from in that later half. The afternoon slate's just absolute fire there, and a lot of good options that you can look to on Texas, guy like maybe Ryan Wingo, some other options that we've talked about that are cheap. So you're not hamstrung if you do go that way and he doesn't play, but definitely news that we're going to want to monitor. So that is the breakdown on Notre Dame. Riley Leonard's a guy that you are pretty familiar with. You used him a lot during his time at Duke. Looking at the quarterbacks, I know you mentioned Jefferson and Sanders, but I haven't really heard you be like, really high on a quarterback. Do you feel like maybe Leonard would be your main team guy, or how are you feeling about that?
Marcel Reed, man. I was high on Marcel Reed if we know he's going to play.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I do think that there is we'll put it this way. There's a lot more upside to Riley Leonard at 79 than there is Shedeur at 94, right? Like we can see we could feasibly get to like a 50-point Riley Leonard game, whereas like Shedeur, he would have to throw for 7 touchdowns to do that, right? And so I do like him. Even 7-9 feels like a lot to pay for a quarterback on this slate, just because there's so much that I want to pay for at running back and receiver. But if I can sneak enough of those, 45 to 4,800 receivers in there that we can get to a $7,900 quarterback, yeah, Riley Leonard is kind of at the top of the list of guys I'm trying to get my way enough salary for.
Yeah, and circling back to Shedeur Sanders, like the expensive non-mobile quarterbacks, like even if they do like the whole 403, like I always bring it back to Shane Buechele when he was at SMU. He would have games where he threw like 400 and 3 touchdowns, but he still would like barely kind of eclipse 30, right? Because there was no rushing upside, and he'd have these really impressive passing games. But once he got to a certain price, it was just that upside was capped. You had a great floor, but you take that risk on a mobile guy like Leonard, who maybe takes you to the promised land, or perhaps like you had mentioned, Marcel Reed, or maybe Hawkins. But yeah, it's going to be a tough decision because I don't really love the quarterback spot too much on this particular slate. It's very obvious for me for running back slate. So Leonard's looking like the guy for me, but we'll see if I want to follow some of these guys on Texas. I'm hearing a lot of talk this week about Texas, even in a blowout. So that leads us right into the last game. 61.5 total, Texas versus Mississippi State, a 38-point spread. And I do think Texas wins by more than that. What do you think?
Yeah. So it's a lot of question marks, and I think we're going to get a lot of question marks with Texas, for some time to come here, because Quinn Ewers is 50-50 to play this week. I don't think it matters who plays quarterback for Texas. They're both 9K. You're not going to use either one of them, I don't think, on a main team, because they're just not going to have to throw the ball enough, which means you are mainly concerned with who is going to score the touchdowns for Texas. Isaiah Bond is 4,800. I don't know, man. We need cheap receivers. He has shown some chemistry with both quarterbacks so far. We can't, in good conscience, pay up for Jaden Blue, although he was extremely efficient. 51-3, and he still got 40 points. So theoretically, you could pay for Jaden Blue to get that huge upside game. But Devin Neal's right there could also get that game, and he's like $1,000 cheaper. So it's kind of like, hey, pick one guy that you think is going to do well from the Texas side and stick to that guy. And if it's Jaden Blue, he better do really well. Wisner is probably back for this one. Gibson, I think, should get a decent amount of volume in this one. All of those guys are viable, along with Matthew Golden and Isaiah Bond and Wingo. Wingo is probably the most compelling, to be frank, down at 3,700. And we're not going to get there on volume. We're not going to get a 10-catch game out of Ryan Wingo by any means, but we could get the Ryan Williams, Jeremiah Smith special, where they get like 2 or 3 catches and somehow still get 120 yards and 2 touchdowns on those 3 catches. That's very much in play with Ryan Wingo, and we've seen that already. 3-1-27-1 against UTSA. So I think you mix and match your Texas exposure if you've got multiple lineups, with Wingo kind of being at the top of that priority for me. And the priority is going to be pretty inversely correlated with the price, because none of these Texas guys are going to be stopped by Mississippi State's defense, and it's just a matter of who happens to get the ball when and be near the end zone and be able to walk in. So spread out the Texas exposure. I don't think this is a game that you would want to game stack. I don't think, unless you have a shout you want to get to on the Mississippi State side, I don't think there's anyone I particularly am looking to use. I think Texas is just going to have the ball for like 45 minutes of this one and score at will. And it's just a question of who's doing the scoring. So that's about as good as I can give you. But yeah, Ryan Wingo at the top of the list, and mix and match the rest of them as you see fit.
So unlike USC, because the last 3 years, it's like USC's defense is going to be better now. That's why, we had that great week 0 last week, and USC defense it's been a little better, I guess, but not great. But every year they say it's going to be better. And every year they say Texas' defense is going to be better. And we've seen some improvements, but they've, last year and the year before they were getting gashed. This year, and granted, they may not have, had the murderer's row of opponents just yet. I know they had the nice game in Michigan, which was a great win. But they've had 3 other opponents that were clearly subpar. So we don't really know just how good that defense is yet, but it looks really, really good. And I'm saying that because Mississippi State I don't know that they're going to score at all. Blake Shapen is injured, so they're going to basically the QB3. I know he was the backup, but he was kind of operating as like the emergency quarterback in Van Buren. It's a very bad situation for them. Kevin Coleman, who we really liked last week, once Shapen went out, like he just did nothing. 6 catches for 19 yards. So no, I don't have anybody on the Mississippi State side. And even if Shapen played, I don't know that they might score 7 if he did. But they don't have that luxury. So what I'm seeing with Texas side is that they're going to be somewhat popular, maybe not at quarterback, but like I like what you said there about Blue. I faded him really heavy in that first week when he was super chalky. I think we could see a return to that. I think he could be very popular. We know their running back room's decimated by injuries, but Wisner coming back, Jarek Gibson can pilfer enough work. My favorite play is if you wouldn't have said it, I would have, but Wingo at that 3.7 price, that's like right up my alley. Like I may end up going there in a main lineup because I feel pretty confident he's going to break one. And at that price, he only needs to break the one for 75 and a touchdown that I think he can do. So I love Ryan Wingo all over that play as well. I think Bond will be popular, who you called out there, and I think we'll see some semi-Texas stacks out there. So for fading it, you're going to have to really kind of hope and pray that your other guys outdid them, or that Texas scores 50 at halftime and they call off the dogs, which is best case scenario for a fade there. But unfortunately, they priced Bond and this really silly price point of 4.8, which I don't quite understand. He had a regular game last week, didn't require him dropping almost 2K. So we'll see how that shakes out.
The only other thing to mention is, because we were so heavily interested in backup quarterback or young quarterback throwing to tight end, your boy Traore down there at 3.4. If we want to open up some value to get to that Colorado UCF game, he is, certainly not a high priority, but is a guy that, should be mentioned in terms of should see some consistent volume from a quarterback that's going to be panicking a decent amount.
Definitely. Yeah. He could get like 3 or 4 catches. They might go for 1 or 2 yards, but yeah, he's certainly in the mix. Good call. All right. So we are done with the game by game portion, getting super efficient here, but we're going to circle back around to cores. I'm going to dive into some PrizePicks underdog betting stuff. Start with PrizePicks, and I'm going to give a couple there, give you an opportunity to pull yours up. I have 3 main ones on PrizePicks that I'm looking at. Number 1 being DJ Giddens, over 96.5 rushing yards. I'm just a DVP guy, so I'm all about that. Throwing in a goblin play on Dante Dowdle. It's 49.5 rushing yards. I think we can take his regular too if we wanted, but I'm going to be throwing that into a bunch of multi-pick parlays. Over 49.5 rushing yards. And then Shedeur Sanders, they have him at 303.5 passing yards. Feel like 350 plus is an inevitability there. So I'm confidently hitting that over 303. It's about 304, 305 on Underdog. Don't care. Take it there too if you want. But those are the 3 main ones I'm looking at PrizePicks. What are some of your favorites for this week?
So per usual, the receptions totals are not up yet. When they are posted, if Will Pauling has one, the over on whatever theoretical total is posted for Will Pauling receptions. For now, we'll have to live with the over 57.5 receiving yards for Will Pauling. I think we get over 100 yards. I think we do it pretty easily. Same game, Zachariah Branch over 52.5. He might get that on one play. So I think both of those guys, you get a little bit of, positive correlation there using both of those guys in the same game to have big games, and, not coincidentally guys that I'm interested in on the DFS side as well. Moving over to the rushing yards, Riley Leonard, over 53.5 rushing yards. I don't see Louisville getting to the quarterback a whole lot, sacking him and depleting that total. I think that's a pretty safe one with how much he's been running the ball of late. And then do we have any amount of we don't really have fantasy scores yet, do we? Huh?
No.
I'll take the theoretical RJ Harvey fantasy score over, as long as it's lower than 27.5. I'll take the RJ Harvey fantasy score over. So we'll look for that one to get posted too.
Yeah, and real quick, one to piggyback off the Riley Leonard rushing play. Haynes King had some pretty good success. He threw for over 300 yards, but he rushed for like 60 against Louisville. And then if you go to the Jacksonville State game, Louisville won 49-14, but their quarterback, Tyler Huff, he rushed for 101 yards in that game. So the further solidifying the Riley Leonard, not only his prop, but leaning as a main team play. Now I have 3 or 4 here on Underdog, and you had mentioned Will at the top of my list here, and you'd mentioned Will Pauling and receptions. They do have a receptions number for Will Pauling there. It's 4.5, and that was the number 1 Underdog play for me, over 4.5 receptions. So complete lockstep with you there. I think 6+ is probably where you can go on that, maybe even higher.
If Wisconsin gets the opening kick, I think we're at over 4.5 Will Pauling receptions by the end of the first quarter.
Love it. Absolutely. And then Ty Felton over 82.5 receiving yards. He just built, just like 100+ is a lock. Edwards is, Felton's having like a ridiculous season. I think the NFL draft guys are going to go just absolutely bananas for Felton. And then I have 2 unders, one being Hudson Card, under 176.5 passing yards. He's had 2 games where he failed to register even 100. So I feel pretty comfortable there. And then Cyrus Allen, under 34.5 receiving yards. This is kind of a short-sighted play, but he couldn't get open against Bowling Green. He had 0 yards last week. I think that the emergence of Barber being healthy and some other guys, Allen's he's going to have to get all of that on one play, and he's definitely a deep threat, but I'm going to take the under 34.5 receiving yards for him there. But the Pauling receptions and the Card under passing yards, like those are the 2, for me, biggest locks of any props on either PrizePicks or Underdogs for the weekend. So just
Does Louisiana Monroe have a bye this week? I didn't see a general booty passing yards prop anywhere yet.
That he didn't hit. There was, you know what's funny about that is there were people, because I do, my tweet deck, and there were people who were tweeting about General Booty's prop that didn't know anything about the situation and anything about him, that were like, well, passing, it's got to take the over. And I saw so many people that don't follow college football hitting that over, only to be disappointed. So they're playing, I don't know, they're playing Troy, I think. But yeah, I thought that was quite comical that the books cleaned up on that one. All right. So I just want to talk about a couple of bets here, and then we'll get core slate breakers and be done. BYU money line. We talked about that early on. Absolutely love it. TCU Kansas over 59 points. The Auburn money line, which they're +1 right now. I can't imagine by game time they're not just favorites. North Texas -6.5 against Tulsa. North Texas, they might not have their guy anymore at the head coach spot, but their offense has been amazing. Haven't had them on any slates yet, but just wait until you do. They're a very fun team. Wisconsin +15.5. You had mentioned maybe sprinkling the money line. That was one that was in my list. Definitely like that. But those are the primary bets here. Let's get into cores, and then we'll get the slate breaker, and I have a touchdown call that we'll end with from my end. But what's your DraftKings core looking like at this moment in time?
So I think we're going to go because we don't know that we're for sure getting Marcel Reed. I think I have to go Riley Leonard at quarterback, RJ Harvey at running back, and Will Pauling at receiver.
Love it. For me, I am going to neglect to put a quarterback. I'm going to go double running back and a receiver. Devin Neal, obviously. Dante Dowdle, who I have that feeling. And then my core wide receiver here, and I haven't changed it. I did my notes before the show. I had it as Ryan Wingo, which I think I'm going to lean into that one. I think Pauling is the obvious one there. I'll be on him with you there. But Ryan Wingo, I think he's gonna dazzle us a little bit. And then FanDuel, wanted to bring up a FanDuel core there. Had some FanDuel people asking last week. Jake Retzlaff, who is very cheap, under 9K. I do like him there. DJ Giddens, who is now very cheap on FanDuel at 8.5. Almost every other running back, such as Harvey, over 9K by a lot. And then you have the 4K Colin Lacey if he plays, but Jabre Barber at 4,600 on FanDuel opens up a lot. You can fit those Colorado UCF guys a lot easier there with Barber. All right, that takes us to the slate breaker call of the week. We're going to be hitting hard. The Montague call was sound. It was great. Rutgers game was weird. But I don't think we accounted for Brown, who had been getting more and more carries, but Montague just didn't have it for whatever reason. I think he might have been out the night before partying or something, because he just didn't look right. But that was still a great call, and I would play him 1,000,000 times out of 1,000,000 in the same situation. So what's this week looking like? Who's our slate breaker? What's their stat line? Let's get it back.
Yeah, man. If we had gone with like Rutgers running back aggregate position, that call would have done really well. Sure. Yeah, unfortunately, Mongai didn't get in the end zone other than the once. We didn't quite get there. We're going back to the well that of the guy that I talk about glowingly and passionately during the game-by-game section, and we are going to go to Will Pauling. I think I shouted out the stat line earlier, but we're going to go with 12 catches for 147 yards and a touchdown. At 4.8, that'll certainly get the job done. And I also am going to say that propels Wisconsin to a victory over the Trojans.
I love it. I am very, normally I'm always confident in your calls, but that one feels extremely good. If that doesn't hit, it's going to be a real shocker. I think it would take an injury for that one not to hit. And I will piggyback off that. We'll just be in alignment because we don't do it very often. And I think this will give us all the good energy in the world. But the anytime touchdown that I'm going to go with this week will be Will Pauling as well. And they never give us like plus 450 odds anymore. They're too scared after last year. But It's plus 215 for Will Pauling to score an anytime touchdown. Good enough for me to throw a note or two on, so I like that one. Will Pauling is the star of the show. He will bring us to the promised land in prop betting and DFS. Love it. That's our dude. We are going to get out of here early, 15 minutes earlier than usual. The efficiency, we're on it, man. Technical difficulties be damned. Appreciate everybody who continue to support us and the show. We'll be back Saturday morning, 1 hour live before a lock. Definitely tune in there. Looks like there's shaping up to be a lot of injury news that we're going to want to track. We'll also have the ownership projections there in hand. We'll be able to do some last minute lineup stuff and get back in the winner circle for main slate, green screens, window trips galore. We're out of here. Thanks, everybody. Take care. See you next week.